إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعين ونستغفره ونؤمن به وتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له أما بعد وقال الله تعالى في القرآن المجيد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وبشر الصابرين الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Today we will be taking a break from our series on Al-Aqsa to discuss some lessons from the passing away of a great man. As the Ummah, we are dealing with multiple problems at the same time. We wanted to do a series of khutbahs on Al-Aqsa because we know what's going on in the Holy Land. But at the same time, we are dealing with a pandemic, which is now in its third wave. And one of the great ulama of this country, who was responsible for helping us work out our solutions for how to deal with this pandemic, passed away this morning from it. So today, inshallah, I just want to discuss some important lessons that we can take from the legacy of Mufti Taha Karaan, rahimahullah. You know, it's difficult to talk about this topic because one of the things that frustrates me, it really frustrates me about our community, is that it's only when someone of this status passes away that suddenly everybody talks about how great he was. A year ago, Facebook was full of vile comments aimed at this Mufti and his organization for encouraging social distancing, for telling us to close the masjids during the heights of the pandemic. People accused him of all kinds of things for passing a fatwa saying that we should social distance, saying that we should take our precautions. But he stuck by his fatwa because he knew that that is what is best for the community. That is the kind of man that he was. He was a man who stood by his principles. And he wasn't afraid of what people would say about him. But what frustrates me is that the same people who a year ago would be attacking him for this fatwa are now talking about what the great scholar we lost. And it's not the first time this has happened. You know, we have this problem in our country that we don't appreciate intellectual giants amongst us until they are gone. 20 years ago, we saw that same vileness and harshness and bad attitude towards the late Sheikh Ahmad Didat. Wherever you go, people used to talk bad about him. And people used to put him down. And here's the funny thing, anywhere else you used to go in the world, people used to praise him. And people used to want him to visit their country. And people used to want him to lecture. But when he came back home to Durban, the community was against him, with a few exceptions. And then when he passed away, everybody was there for the janazah. And everybody was praising him. And everyone was talking about how much he contributed to the da'wah. The same people saying don't do da'wah like him were talking about how much he contributed to the da'wah. And it wasn't just him. Over the past 20 years, we see the same pattern with great person after great person in this community. Anytime South Africa produces a thinker who is able to think outside of the box and contribute to scholarship in any field while remaining within Sunni Islam, we find a way to put him down. It can be someone in the field of da'wah, like Sheikh Ahmad Didat. It can be a giant in the field of fiqh, like Mufti Taha. It can be someone who contributes to Islamic economics. Whatever it is, we find a way to put them down. And we find ways to talk bad about them, and we don't give them the support that they need. And then when they pass away, we all say we're so shocked. We're so sad. You know, some of the comments that I've heard this week is that South Africa lost a hidden gem. Why was he hidden? Why was he a hidden gem? He was here for 20 years. Why was he a hidden gem? He should have been front and center everywhere. Everyone should be knowing him. Everyone should have been taking knowledge from him. Why is he a hidden gem? People said that we lost an overlooked scholar. Why was he overlooked? Everyone knows how much knowledge he had. Everyone knows what an eloquent speaker he was. Everyone knows his contributions to scholarship. Again, the difference between other countries and South Africa. Last year I was studying a course in Usul al-Fiqh with scholars in London. And we were studying Mufti Taha's writings. Because the ulama of London appreciate his writings. Yet when I'm studying with the ulama in South Africa, nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to talk about his writings. And when we go overseas, everybody appreciates it. And people came from America to visit him and to spend time with him and to learn from him. But we didn't do the same. So I want us to take a lesson from this. The lesson is that we need to learn to appreciate people while they are alive. Because I've noticed that amongst us, Allah keeps sending to this community amazing individuals. And they mostly go down one of three paths. The first part is they realize no one's going to listen to them and they just stay quiet. They just stay quiet and nobody ever hears what they have to say. Because they are so afraid of losing their jobs. They are so afraid of losing their position as imam. They are so afraid of what the community is going to say that they never say what they need to say. The second thing that happens is they leave the country. And I personally know so many of my friends and teachers, people who have done amazing work in South Africa, people who have contributed greatly to helping us grow as a community. But this community shunned them, called them names, threw labels at them, refused to give them jobs, refused to give them positions of authority. And now they are in Malaysia, they are in Canada, they are in the USA, they have huge masjids there, big followings there, they are very happy there. Those countries gain with our loss. And the third thing that happens is that they work for other people, they travel the world, they give their lectures overseas, and they come back home and nobody knows them. As was the case with the late Ahmadiyya rahimahullah. We need to start appreciating those who live amongst us. And we need to start giving them the time, the freedom, and the resources to grow and to do the work that they need to do. Because someone like Mufti Taha, if he was born in America, or in Canada, or in the UK, he would have been given a lot more resources. Alhamdulillah, for the past 2 years he had the MJC. But in those countries he would be given much earlier. And he would be given much more. He wouldn't have to deal with what we deal with in this country. And really this message needs to reach everyone. We need to stop being vile towards each other. Anytime a difference of opinion pops up, go onto any Muslim group on Facebook, and there is so much harshness and so much judgment. It's as if we don't see the other person as our brother in Islam. All we can see is the most negative things about them. And very often, it's people who have no knowledge of fiqh criticizing ulama. People who have no knowledge of da'wah criticizing the da'i. People who have no knowledge of aqidah criticizing the aqidah expert. We need to appreciate people of knowledge while they are alive and not wait until they pass away to appreciate them. Mufti Taha, one of the lessons we can take from his life is how to be grounded in your madhab and still be an intellectual giant. You see, one of the big debates of the 20th century was, do we need madhabs? And this was the big debate of the 20th century. This is why the whole Salafi movement sprung up. Because one group of people said, we don't need madhabs anymore, and that became the Salafis. Another group said, no, we just stick into our madhab no matter what. But as time went by, a middle part solution formed. We stick to our madhabs, but in certain issues, for practical reasons, we take knowledge from the other madhabs. And alhamdulillah, Mufti Taha was from that perspective. He was a great Shafi'i scholar, but he took knowledge from all the madhabs. And he showed respect to ulama of all the madhabs. And he was able to know in this issue, the Hanafi view is better, and in that issue, the Maliki view is better. And he showed us that way. You don't have to reject the madhabs. You don't have to be fanatical about the madhabs. You can respect them and treat them all as bodies of knowledge. And so we learn from him the proper attitude to have towards the madhabs. How do you become a scholar of a madhab? He should be our role model. A scholar of a madhab, our role model should be people like Mufti Taha. Another lesson we can take from him is the importance of being outspoken. When you know that the community needs to hear something. A year ago, he made this video telling us to social distance, telling us to close the masjid for a few months. And people said what they said. And people attacked him. And people posted vile things about the MJC and about him. And people said all kinds of things, but he stuck to that fatwa. Because he knew this was for the sake of our health. And that wasn't the first time that happened. You know, the first time I heard of Mufti Taha was when a certain group called him a deviant and a kafir because he said women are allowed to cut their hair. And they literally wrote a 300-page book, so-called refuting him for that. A very secondary issue of fiqh. They were willing to vilify a man for taking a very logical approach to fiqh. And that's when I learned to appreciate him. That this is a man who's willing to stand by his fatwa even when people are talking like this about him. So we as a community, we can take a lot of lessons from the life of this great scholar who has passed away. And he passed away at a relatively young age. And the lesson I take from that, and that we all should take from that, is that none of us should feel that we are so important that Allah is definitely going to give us a long life. Because someone as important as him is gone. And before him, people greater than him went at a young age. We study the lives of people like Imam An-Nawawi, passed away very young. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz passed away when he was 37. Mus'ab ibn Umair, one of the greatest Sahaba, passed away in his 20s. Like we don't, if they weren't guaranteed a long life, why do we think we are guaranteed a long life? So we should live the best lives we can live. Lives that are pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Lives that are grounded in the service of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that if our death comes to us early, inshallah we meet Allah in a way that is pleasing to Him. And so these are some of the lessons we can take from the life of this great man who has passed away. We ask Allah to fill his qabr with nur and to accept his good deeds and to forgive him for any of his mistakes and to allow us to follow in his footsteps and to add any good deeds that we do to his scale as well, because for most of us here, he has influenced us in some way or another. Subhana rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salam ala mursaleen walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعين ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. One very beautiful lesson that we can take from the death, the passing of Mufti Taha. He passed away on a Jum'ah during the last 1/3 of the night, Tahajjud time, from a disease which inshallah will be accepted as martyrdom. To die on a Jum'ah is a good death. To die in the last 1/3 of the night is inshallah a good death. To die from COVID as a believer is a good death. The Prophet ﷺ said that the plagues are a mercy for this ummah, because it's the means of our sins being forgiven if we die from it. A triple over good death. What's the lesson we take from that? The lesson that we take from that is that we should live our lives in such a way that inshallah we also have a good ending. Very often we forget about the importance of a good ending. That we focus so much on now that we don't think about in what state will I leave this world. We're so caught up in enjoying this moment, enjoying what we have right now, that we don't think about when I leave this world, will I live in a way that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what can we do to make sure we have a good ending? Well, of course we live a good life. In general, most people pass away based on the lifestyle that they choose to live. And Allah wills otherwise whomever He wills. Right? There are some people who live their whole lives in sin, but Allah gave them a good death and forgiveness for their sins. And there's some people who live their whole lives in apparent righteousness, but because of a disease in their heart that only Allah knew about, they died in a disgraceful manner. Right? So that's the exceptions. The norm is, if you live a good life, sincerely for the sake of Allah, Allah will take you in a way that is a good death. The people who are attached to Salah often pass away in Salah. People who are attached to the Quran often pass away reciting Quran. People who are attached to the books of Islam pass away when reading or writing a book of Islam. These are things that happen. And we see it throughout our history. Even with the Sahaba, the great Sahabi Usman radiallahu anhu, who was known as the man of the Quran. And he was known as a man of fasting. How did he pass away? He was murdered while fasting, while reciting Quran. That is a good ending. That is a good ending. Martyrdom while doing two good deeds. You know, so how do you get there? Well, if you look at the life of Usman radiallahu anhu, he is a man of the Quran. That famous hadith, the best of you are those who learn the Quran and teach it. Who is the narrator of that hadith? It's Usman radiallahu anhu. He was known as a man of the Quran. He was known as a man who fasted often. And Allah took his life at a time when he was fasting and reciting Quran. Double good deeds. Triple if you consider it martyrdom as well, a triple good ending. And anyone can achieve this. Anyone with the qadr of Allah and the help of Allah can achieve a good ending. We do it by number one, living a life that is pleasing to Allah. Number two, by asking Allah for a good ending. How many of us make dua for a good death? How many of us ask Allah to take us in a way that is pleasing to Him? How many of us, when you're making dua for the elderly, for those who are close to death, for those who are on their deathbeds, how many of us make dua, Allah give them a good ending? We don't think about this. We don't want to think about death because it's a scary thought. But guess what? If you have a good ending, then that's not a scary thing. Death is the beginning of eternal happiness. It becomes the best thing to ever happen to you. It becomes the fulfillment of the promise of Allah at the end of Surah Al-Fajr. In those beautiful verses that we hear very, very often when someone passes away. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Ya ayyatuha nafsul mutma'inna, irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyah. Oh, that soul that has attained inner peace, return to your Lord happy and making Allah happy. Return to your Lord in the state where you are happy and Allah is happy. فَدْخُلِي فِي عِبَادِي وَادْخُلِي جَنَّتِي. So enter amongst my righteous servants, you will enter my gardens. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is promising us throughout the Quran, in other verses as well. The verse about the awliya, that the angels will come to them at the time of death and tell them, don't be sad, don't be scared. And the angel will give you good news at the time of your death if you live your life in a way that's pleasing to Allah. That the angel of death, many of us when we think of the angel of death, we think of this scary figure that's going to come and traumatize us. But the Quran says that if you are righteous, the angel of death will come and tell you, relax, calm down, this is good. He will be there to comfort you. That the angels will take your soul in a state that you are happy and Allah is happy. But to get there, we must live our lives in a way that is pleasing to our Creator. And so this is a lesson that we can take from the passing of this great man. May Allah accept his death as a good ending. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant him the highest levels of Jannah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us a next generation of ulama that can continue with his legacy, because really one of our big worries now is that for a while our community has not been producing ulama. At least not on that caliber. And we have lost so many in the past year from this pandemic. We wonder what's going to happen to the next generation. Make dua that Allah, whatever He has taken from us, He replaces it with that which is better. He has taken from us great scholars. May the next generation of scholars be even better. May our students and our children and their generation have even greater scholars amongst them, who will lead this ummah forward and allow us to grow as a community and allow Islam to grow in this country to reach its full potential. And one of the things that Mufti Taha always used to talk about is that Allah sent this religion to dominate over all other religions. And we have to play our part in making sure that this becomes the dominant religion. And one of the ways that we can do that is by ensuring that we follow this religion properly, we practice it properly, and we teach it to others properly. And that we represent it properly. So it can grow. So more people will convert to Islam, and more people will accept Islam, and more people will grow to love Islam and become part of this community. So it can once again be what it once was. For the bulk of our history, Islam dominated. We're living one of those few times where we did not. And Allah allow us to see a time again in the near future where Islam once again becomes dominant and becomes the global power that it once was. Allahumma ighfir hayyina wa mayyitina wa shahidina wa ghaibina wa saghirina wa kabina wa zakina wa unsana. Allahumma ighfir lana dhunuba ajma'in. Allahumma ighfir li mawla ta'ha dhunuba ajma'in waj'alhu min al-awliya waj'alhu min al-muttaqin. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا وأخطأنا ربنا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين سبحان ربك إذ عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Quick announcement before we